Well, I get started. I would like to tell you a little bit about the future mobility that I see. You all know who the family Ford is. Henry Ford was the guy who brought us from the horse to the automobile. So let's say about 100 years ago. But what amazes me mostly right now is what his grandson Bill Ford said just recently. He sees the coming revolution in mobility being a bigger change to society and the way we perceive mobility than what we went through like about 100 years ago. And that's pretty mind-boggling, right? So why is that? Well, one reason is that the car has changed. This has been, after the horse, the personal car became the key tool for personal and flexible mobility, of course, in combination with other transportation means. But this vehicle is changing radically. It's being electrified. It's getting a lot of other features on cars that are launched today that were not there 20 years ago. And what plays a key role in my presentation, in my daily work, is the fact that they are also becoming more and more self-driving. But if we combine this, if we package this in the right way, I can assure you that we can come up with a mobility that is safer, it's more efficient, it's more affordable, and it's of course also sustainable. Do you believe me? If not, I'm going to play you a little video so that to give you a glimpse of the city of tomorrow and the way we think that mobility will or could work if we behave correctly. So please join me to the city of tomorrow.
Our city has grown up pretty much like all the other cities, and it constantly changes. We become more people, the city grows, we build houses, more roads and parking lots, more vehicles. But human beings also need space. So what would happen if we drive away the cars of today and start using autonomous cars instead? Autonomous cars don't need any signs, and autonomous cars need less space, enabling wider sidewalks. It creates more space for us humans. And autonomous cars can drive and park themselves somewhere else. Look at this commuter station. You will be picked up as soon as you leave the train, because autonomous cars know when you arrive. So this reduces waiting times, less pressure, less stress, and autonomous cars will take you all the way home. Check out these autonomous trucks. They're driving close to each other because they automatically line up into road trains. This saves loads of energy for transport, and that is good for all of us. And since the autonomous vehicles communicate their arrival times with their destination, the loading and unloading can go so much smoother. And when the trucks don't have to stand and wait, can use their parking lots for other things. Look at the front of the shopping mall. It's just a lot of parking lots. We would not need all of them anymore. We could do something funny. It could be a park instead, with an outdoor swimming pool and a cinema. This is a place to live in. So with autonomous cars, more space is created around the needs of people. Cities become nicer and more beautiful. Streets become safer, travel smoother, less noisy, more space for life. Well, it will be better.
The thing though is that this doesn't happen by itself. You don't see Ford or Volvo implementing this or a city of their own, but you really need to work together. And that's what makes the Strategic Innovation Program such a great place and great tool for this kind of activity. A Strategic Innovation Program was established as a working method by the Swedish government a few years ago, and we are one among some 15 such programs running now. And the focus that we have is really to build the next generation mobility based on connected, automated, not necessarily from day one, but they will become more increasingly self-driving. Shared vehicles is really important in this context. Electrification, of course, is going to happen anyway, but it just happened not to be the specific scope for our program. But what is really important is policy development, because if we let this development run loose, driven by market forces, things may not turn out really well. So we need to keep an eye on policies. We're definitely going to have to work with business models, and we also will need some sort of digital infrastructure to make up for the physical infrastructure that we may be able to reduce. When we started the program, we were some 20 partners. Today we're 80 plus, 3 years later. And by the way, this is a 12-year effort, so we just barely got started. We're in the 3rd year of operation right now. The interesting thing here, though, is that we have a really good mix, which is very typical for Sweden, that we are able to work this way. I've had lots of visits from other countries, and they are just blown away by the fact that we can sit at the same table, having the same kind of vote for the government agencies, for industry, for researchers. So what you see here is really a good mix of actors that are all critical for this development to take place. I'm also very happy that we have a lot of international partners now, because this is not going to be a Swedish solution only, but there are other international partners that are keen to work with us, because they simply love this, what we call a triple helix model in Sweden. So how really is this going to affect the personal mobility? Well, if you look at this graph here, and I think you're young and bright, you understand this graph immediately. Here's a driver control vehicle, and he owns it himself. Here's a driverless, and here's a vehicle which is shared. This is the business model that we've been experiencing now for the last 100 years. Car manufacturer sells the cars to me. I barely use it, but it's there for me when I need it. What happens now when the cars become more and more self-driving is that almost every car manufacturer went into that domain of this graph. And at the same time, they realized that the sharing economy is actually really starting to affect the world. So they also at the same time started to build like a parallel business line here, in which they also hedge their bets by maybe we're not going to sell cars in the future, maybe we're going to provide mobility in the future instead. So they went to the right in this graph. And then you have the public transport and taxi operators, and if you're smart, which I know you are, you can read Uber and Lyft and Didi behind that label there. Everyone is fighting for a huge market to provide our mobility in the future. So really what this is all about is that we're going from owning a car, which is again used less than 5% of our time, to subscribing to mobility, or do a Spotify on the transportation market, which I usually explain with. That will happen, and what that comes down to then is that it's really not going to be only the car, but we really need to have a mix of all transportation means. There's need to be buses, trains, railways, shared bikes, shuttles, cable cars, you have it. And one of our programs is actually working on establishing this as the new norm for travel in Sweden. Right now, the norm is unfortunately that you're supposed to have a car, or many people have a car, at least outside of Stockholm. But we really hope that this will be the new norm, that we subscribe to mobility when we need it. That doesn't exclude that we can have a car for the weekend if you're going on to visit Aunt Sally. But we shouldn't really need to own a car, every one of us, or every family. So we call it mobility as a service, and you could also call it like a third generation of mobility. I mentioned that we need to rely on public transportation as well. Some writers in media has been a little bit delusional and think that we can support all travel in an urban city with cute little Google cars, two-seater cars. Clearly that's not possible. I came here on the Pendle train, and I mean, realizing how many people that flows into there, I mean, that can never be replaced by two-seaters or four-seaters or even 10-seaters. So the main backbone in our public transportation, mass transit system, needs to remain there. But then the self-driving technology can come in very handy in providing connectivity in that network. For example, you can use the little two-seaters as feeders to the public transportation hub in the suburbs maybe. In the cross network here, sometimes it's difficult, you don't need to go to Stockholm Central all the time, but if there would be a self-driving shuttle driving across here, that will become very useful. And that type vehicle is actually becoming really popular here in the early days of self-driving cars. So at this time, there are some 30 such pilots running all around the world. This vehicle we've had running in Kista, not far away from here, since January. We managed to survive the entire winter without basically any stop in operation, even though we had a really tough winter. And I just got the word on my way here that we've had 14,000 passengers on this vehicle already this year. So one important step in building this new mobility. Similar experiment in Gothenburg, Chalmers University, this shuttle is now running in May, and after summer it will be used in a remote parking shuttle application in Lindholmen in Gothenburg. These are just some examples of projects that we're busy with. We are all the time creating new pieces, missing pieces to the puzzle, and building the big picture of this. And it's really not all about driverless vehicle, but this is a new form of mobility that I'm really proud of being part of this development, and I hope that you, largely representing the younger generation, will also buy into this concept, because this can change the world. Thank you very much. I'll stop there and leave it to speaking to Luke.